Good afternoon. I will call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee for the Metropolitan Council on April 21st, 2025. We have a quorum of the committee. Other committee members will be joining us. Councilmember Wolf, if I'm not mistaken, will not be joining us today.
Right,
but she's
we have a letter.
Yeah,
That'll be read.
right. And she has a statement to be read today. I welcome everyone that's here. It's great to see so many folks here. And I'm assuming you're all here for item 2025-88. Is that correct? The City of Farmington Technology Park Comprehensive Plan. Is there anyone who's here for something else? Cool. I think I will ask for any kind of public input or test when we get to that item, if that's cool. Great. And to start out, for my first time ever, I get to read our Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. The Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota, and specifically the 7-county region, is the ancestral homeland of the Dakota Oyate, who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unresolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Oyate, the Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in our regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Oyate, the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities, representing over 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county region home. Miigwech. Now I will move on committee members to approval of the agenda, and Michelle informs me, the recording secretary, that they now want a motion to approve rather than just consent. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
Thanks, Councilmember Carter. Thanks, Councilmember Chambliss. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next is the approval of the Community Development Committee minutes for April 7th, 2025. Is there a motion to approve, please?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. And Councilmember Lee seconds. Thank you. Any discussion, additions, or corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The Community Development Committee minutes are approved. Next is our consent business item 2025-87, Baker Park Reserve Long Range Plan. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Is there a second? Councilmember Lee, thank you. I will note that this item was approved at the Parks and Open Space Commission unanimously. Hearing no discussion, all in approval, please say aye.
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 We are on 2025-87.
Correct, the consent.
I apologize. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Did you want to say something,
No,
Councilmember?
thank you.
Okay, cool. All in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Now we'll move on to our non-consent business items, of which we have two. The first is item 2025-88. It's the City of Farmington Park Technology Park Comprehensive Plan Amendment. It's review file 22086-7, and Mr. Boylan is here to present. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren. Hi, my name is Patrick Boylan. I'm a sector representative and local planning assistant here in community development, and I'll be presenting this item today for you. Just really quick, before I launch into it, just want to acknowledge there's been a lot of public attention. Councilmember Wolf, who is not here tonight, and I have received a lot of correspondence about this. I also want to just acknowledge that Farmington staff, Deanna Kennan, who's a Community and Economic Development Director, and Tony Whippler, who's a Planning Manager, were really helpful and very patient with us as we process this amendment.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Boylan. And I will note that I believe Councilmember Carter has a statement from Councilmember Wolf that she'll read when we
Okay,
get to that.
thank you. And again, I just really quickly also that city staff, for myself, we've worked really closely with environmental services staff, and in particular, Kyle Colvin, Environmental Services, and then our leadership here, Director Brajas and Angela Torres is my manager for their leadership. And then I've worked closely with John Clark, Jen Koshusi, and John Klebeck in Environmental Services on this. So. And finally, just a quick shout out, thank you to Ariane Awazi, who is our new LPA staffer, who was really helpful in this. So next slide, please.
Patrick, you have to click that yourself.
I have to move it. Never mind, I guess I'm going to do it.
There we go.
Image before you shows the community designation under Thrive MSC 2040. This is the city of Farmington. It's surrounded by Lakeville, Empire, Castle Rock Township, and Eureka. It's a very pale color. It looks almost white on the screen. It's actually a pale yellow, and that is a emerging suburban edge community. Next door is Empire, which has both the green, the darker green is the agriculture area, and then Lakeville, the kind of medium color yellow, is a suburban edge community. The city is in south central Dakota County, and has this imagery before us has the regional systems involved. The area in red is the amendment in question, or the area where the amendment is located. There's a trail search corridor and 2 regional trails, and notable is that the Empire wastewater treatment plant, although in the city of Empire, does serve the city of Farmington and is just off to the east. Details involving re-guiding of 344.5 acres, and there's a variety of uses shown in a image in your staff report. And the variety of future land uses include commercial, low and medium density, residential, parks and open space, and non-designated. This is the annexed area that was part of the township until April of 2024. This has all been proposed to be re-guided to mixed use for commercial industrial uses. The amendment site is located in southwest Farmington, south of 222nd Street, and west of Biscayne. This is the city's sixth amendment since they adopt their 2040 comprehensive plan. This is a existing land use showing the residential, low density, medium density residential, the park open space, and commercial in the northern part and the southern part of the site. The cloud area, the firmer polygon is the actual site area. The gray is the area of the map that is non-designated. That is part of a annexation agreement between the city of Farmington and Castle Rock Township, filed in 2017, but amended and reviewed by the Office of Municipal Boundary Adjustment, and their docket OA 1661-1 approved this in April of last year, almost a year ago exactly. The proposed use includes this purple area, which is these mixed-use commercial industrial, and the city reviewed this and sent this to us. This, of note of this area too, this was actually subject to environmental review. I was a principal reviewer for it back last fall. And we did a series of reviews under environmental review rules, and that was for the Farmington Technology Park. It was an AUAR, and we sent, on October 18th of 2024, we provided water supply, land use, and wastewater comments for this. Findings before you today for this staff report is that this does not change the city's forecast, that the proposal conforms to regional systems plan for regional parks, transportation, and wastewater, and with no substantial impact on or departure from these systems. We find that the proposal is consistent with forecast, land use, and surface water. The proposed action for you today is to authorize the city to place this amendment and allow the city to put it in effect, and find the amendment does not change the city's forecast. I'm going to actually read this verbatim. It's important information, these next 2 slides. Metropolitan Council strongly advises the city that because of the potential volume and chemical characteristics of wastewater from the site, the council is concerned about a potential wastewater system impact. Therefore, the council advises the city to consider the full extent of the advisory comments in the review record for wastewater. Because of the volume of projected water use identified for the site, the council is concerned about the potential water demand trade-off between its immediate industrial use versus the population future growth of the city. Therefore, the council advises the city to consider the full extent of the advisory comments in the review record for water supply. Also, that the plan remains inconsistent with the council housing policy and may not draw down funds awarded by Livable Communities Act programs. And finally, to implement the advisory comments and re-record for forecasts. Water supply and sanitary sewer staff are available here should there be specific questions about those two advisory comments in the staff report. And Chair Lilligren, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moylan, for the report and for all of your work on this. Again, thanks for everyone who is attending today, interested in this item. I think what I'll do is start with committee member questions or comments. Then I'll turn to the public if there's anyone here that wants to address this committee on this item. And then Councilmember Carter, I'll turn to you with the request that you please read Councilmember Wolf's comments. So committee members, questions, comments on this report or this proposed action? Any questions? Oh, I thought there were going to be questions. All right. What's that?
Well done report.
Very well done report, Mr. Boylan. There are no questions here. Thanks. So I'll turn to the public here. I have maybe 10 or so people that have signed in. Only one of the people have indicated that they're here to address the committee, but I will allow anyone, or I'll ask anyone that's here to please step forward. But the one person I have that signed in is a Mr. Gary Johnson. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Terry Pierce, no.
No, you're right.
Mr. Johnson, all right, please come forward, Mr. Johnson, and identify yourself for the record. You choose, you can stand if you like, you can sit if you like.
All right. My name is Gary Johnson, live at 22280 Berrien Avenue, Farmington, actually
Thank you.
Castle Rock Township, Minnesota. I will beg your forgiveness before I get started because I'm a little bit not familiar with all community requirements and activities with the Met Council.
Sure.
But I have a question first off is why is the Farmington Technology Park on the agency's agenda for today? What, are you planning a vote today?
I'll look to Mr. Boylan for part of that question and then possibly to Director Barajas if that doesn't, yeah. So, and I think kind of elaborate on the nature of this vote, that we're not approving any specific permitting or project today, correct? It's just the amendment.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Lilligren. Just so I paraphrase so I understand your question, I stated correctly. You're curious, Mr. Johnson, about why this is on the agenda today and why we're reviewing. Okay. The city of Farmington wished to amend its future land use to allow a technology park to go in. There's no site plan as of today. So part of this amendment, this is actually fairly common, is to either get a site plan driven or we get a change in land use anticipating an end user. As I understand it, as of today, there is no end user for sure identified. Lots of times when people purchase land to build residential or industrial uses or commercial uses, they wait for full comp plan and zoning approvals to go through before they can even approach financing for these types of project. This type of project or this amount of land would be in the multi-millions of dollars. So not surprising that that's the case. So we are not approving a site plan today. We are approving just the future land use change for this from those multiple colors of residential, commercial, open space to the gray or the purple color for the future land use, which does allow industrial uses on it.
Thank you, Mr. Boylan. Mr. Johnson.
Okay. There is pending legislation from two parties involved in this transaction. If you make these amendments and approve these amendments and that legislation goes through to the negative impact of the city, are they can it be overturned?
Thank you. Is this Director Barajas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson, it was a very good question. Under Minnesota law, when a city or the council receives an application for our review, we have to review that application within prescribed timelines under the law, under the laws that are in place at the time that that application is found complete for review. So we have an application in front of us to amend a local comprehensive plan. It is found complete for review, so we review it under the current regulatory frameworks in the state of Minnesota and the council's current policies. There is only one instance where it could be considered an retroactive application of the law if a law were to be passed, and that's if the legislature were to make it retroactive and to say that it's as of a date sometime prior to the date of their adoption. At this point, we have to use the laws that are in place at the time that we're reviewing them.
Okay, so what you're saying is it's basically not amendable, or you can't withdraw it unless the legislature passes something. Am I correct in interpreting that way?
Director Barajas?
The action, Mr. Chair, council members and members of the public here, an action of the council to authorize a local unit of government to place their amendment or their comprehensive plan into effect is effective unless it is modified by the legislature for some reason.
What is being argued in here is the city of Farmington is violating an orderly annexation agreement with Castle Rock Township. That's a lawful agreement. And if they make the changes, that violates the orderly annexation agreement. And you're saying if that case with the township wins, there's no way to repeal this? In other words, they get what they want by violating the agreement, even though the Castle Rock Township would win their lawsuit. Is that fair to the people?
Director Barajas?
Sure, Mr. Chair, council members, Mr. Johnson. It is our understanding that the Office of Administrative Hearings has authorized the annexation. If there is a legislative change, it would have to be directed by the, if the courts find out otherwise through a legal case, then the courts would need to direct a change to the city to make a change to their comprehensive plan, and we would review that change at that time. That has happened in the past in other cities across this region. It's not common, but it does happen from time to time, and that would be the instance in which the council would re-review any changes to an amendment, but it would be a case that's directed between a city. So a city would need to be in response to that legal.
So if the city loses their case and they refuse to make the changes, they're in the driver's seat.
I could not speak to that, Mr. Chair, committee members. I could not speak to that. That is a case, we don't enforce legal cases between cities and complainants in that case. That would be something that the complainant would need to bring forward to the courts about enforcement of any action that comes from the courts.
Then again, I would question why you would consider approving this when there's a law case against it. I would also ask, what has changed since the last time they came to you to complete or to approve this comp plan, and you said no because the DNR has not given approval? Why is that different now?
So to the first point, Mr. Johnson, if I understood Director Barajas correctly, we have a statutorily obligation to act on this in a certain time frame, right? So that's why we're moving today, correct? That's correct. But do you want to hit the other part of Mr. Johnson's concerns? Thanks.
Okay, can I make a comment to that?
Let's have Director
Okay.
Barajas respond first and then.
Thank you. During the review process, when council staff receive an application to amend a plan, the staff always review for completeness. Did they have all items that are required as part of the amendment submitted as part of their application to the council? In this case, we had a question on whether or not the existing water supply plan was sufficient under the DNR. DNR is the permitting authority in this case to cover this. The DNR had noted that they were okay with that, and therefore we were able to move forward.
I would like to comment on that because I have letters and correspondence between the city and Jack Gleason with the DNR. Jack Gleason was addressing specific questions asked of him. And his comment back was the city's water supply plan does not expire till the end of this year. And there have been no permit applications for any kind of a well. So at this point in time, the DNR has no requirements that they can impose upon the city. This plan, and the water use for this plan will not happen for another 2 or 3 years. How can you be given an approval now when the DNR cannot give it its approval?
Mr. Chair, committee members, I would note there's a reason that we have the strong advisory comments in this proposed actions in front of you today regarding water supply planning. We are aware of that timeline, and I should just clarify that the council's not approving this amendment. We're authorizing the city to take this action with these advisory comments. I know our staff have met with the city and expressed these concerns and walked through those details with them as well, and that they are aware of that expiration and that next step that they'll need to take, as well as the need to apply for groundwater appropriation permits as needed, which are all from the DNR and not within the purview of the council.
And Mr. Johnson, I would just note, and I hear your concerns, and I'm not surprised. And in my time on the council, which is now what, six and a half years, something like that, this is the first time I've ever seen an amendment come forward with strong advisement like this. And so I think there's an understanding that we're moving toward decisions that the Met Council may have a strong interest in. And I think these are kind of in the realm of the concerns that you're expressing in the community concerns. But the wastewater, the groundwater questions will come forward as other actions come to the council or permitting comes to the DNR, correct? That's the permitting authority, cool. So it's not approving any specific project.
Not approving, but you're moving the steps forward and making it much more difficult to stop it. This particular project would be the 8th largest in the world as of the 1st of January 2024, 250 feet from residents' houses. It does not belong near residential property. And if you're allowing the next step in the comp plan approval, you're just going along with it. I mean, this is heavy industrial. It does not belong next to residential zoning. It's got 250 generators. That's equipment. That's machinery. That is heavy industrial. They are trying to put it in mixed-use commercial light industrial. That makes absolutely no sense. I would ask the Met Council to consider that and stop it before it can be, until it can be fully analyzed, before they are given another carrot to say the Met Council approved this.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Director Ross, anything to add? Okay, thank you. Welcome, Councilmember Cameron. Nice to see you. Go. Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Mr.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. I appreciate your being here. I appreciate all the folks coming in. Mr. Johnson was the only person who indicated that he wanted to speak. Were there others from the community, from the city, that want to address us? Yeah, Mr. Boylan.
Chair Lilligren,
Please.
there are at least 4 people from the city of Farmington. I don't know if they wish to speak or not, but I just want to make you aware of that.
And I'm looking at them, and no one's making a move here, so I'm assuming, oh, here comes, please, step forward, identify yourself for the record.
Hi. Thank you for allowing this item to be in front of you today. My name is Lynn Gorski, and I'm the city administrator for Farmington. And I just want to give you our appreciation and give staff appreciation for all the hard work and working with us together on this. And we support the staff recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Norski, for your words and for being here today. If there's no other comment or questions from committee, I would turn to Councilmember Carter to read Councilmember Wolf's statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll read Councilmember Wolf's statement in its complete form. I apologize for not being in attendance at today's community development meeting. I planned a family vacation long before this item was scheduled, and since I'm unable to be there, I've asked Councilmember Carter to read my comments to the committee. The item before us has generated a lot of interest, concerns, and feedback from residents, elected officials, and business people from the area. I have spoken at length with more people on this issue than any other in my 16 years on the council. I am always mindful of staying within the bounds of our authority. So I also spoke at length with council staff on the details of our role as it pertains to the request in front of us. When a comp plan amendment comes before us, the council's role is to evaluate whether the proposed amendment conforms to the regional system plans for regional parks, transportation, and wastewater, with no substantial impact on or departure from these system plans, and that it is compatible with the plans of neighboring jurisdictions. For us to vote to send back an amendment, we would need to clearly identify how it is a departure or system impact, or provide evidence that the city did not consider neighboring jurisdictions. As seen in the staff report, there are no system impacts at this time. There are limits to the amounts and types of wastewater that we can treat, and that has been communicated to the city multiple times, as well as being outlined in some detail in the staff report. That is not, however, the request that we are acting on today. There are also neighborhood concerns over the possible future development. Our standard on that is whether the applicant considered any concerns in their amendment. The 250-foot setback with berms and vegetation is an acknowledgement of the need for a buffer. We do not have the authority to rule on whether that is the right answer. Our role is just to check that the applicant did consider the concerns. When we vote on a plan amendment, we are not voting on whether we like the plan, nor are we issuing a ruling on any lawsuits or requests to other government agencies. We are required to vote on whether the application followed the rules, which this one does. I understand the frustration and concerns of the owners of neighboring properties, but state law is clear that the Metropolitan Council's authority is limited and that local governments have the right to make land use planning choices, such as this one, as long as they have completed the statutory requirements. As such, I urge you to vote to approve the request. And that is Councilmember Wolf's statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Appreciation to Councilmember Wolf for providing us with that statement. Further discussion, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks to the city officials for being here. 20 years ago this fall, I went to Carleton College next door in Northfield, Minnesota. And Farmington has a Farmington Steakhouse. It's really good, and it's very affordable for a college student. If you ever go down there, you got to eat at Farmington Steakhouse.
Thank you for that recommendation. Further discussion by committee members? Further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Boylan has proposed the action to authorize the city to place its comprehensive plan amendment into effect, to find that the amendment does not change the city's forecast, and then some strong advisement to the city about the potential volume and chemical characteristics of wastewater from this site, and also about the projected water use identified for this site, and some other relative actions. I would entertain a motion, please.
I'll move the amendment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Yeah, Councilmember Carter.
I would just add that I know all of us understand the volume of concern that has been generated and processed, and that in this set of actions, it is clear that the council has communicated strongly with the city its advice regarding that volume of chemical characteristic and also the projected water use. I believe that we are acting within our authority and very much appreciate and want to give thanks to Councilmember Wolf also, as she has been deeply involved, communicates her concerns to us, but also advises us to act under our authority. So just thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion on the motion? Councilmember Lindstrom.
Only that, thanks, that it's very clear to everybody that the conversations between the Met Council and the community will continue and as this heads towards some resolution in the years ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Councilmember Carter has moved the proposed action from staff. All in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? That carries. Again, thank you for being here. I'm guessing this will not be the last time that we see this parcel in front of this committee or in front of the council, and we'll see others like this, right, in the near future. So thank you. I appreciate everyone coming down with interest in this item. Mr. Boylan, thanks for your work and for your report. Thank you. We'll move on the agenda and our non-consent business items to 2025-113. It's the implementation of Imagine 2050 in the review of local comprehensive plans and plan amendments. And at this level, at the policy level, a lot of the work around Imagine 2050 seems to have quieted down quite a bit. But I will note at the staff level, a lot of the work is just ramping up. And so we appreciate the work of Ms. Torres. Ms. Berkey is here as well, and Joel Hutting, and your team. I know there's a lot of work going on, so we appreciate that. So welcome, Ms. Torres.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair and committee members. As you probably know, I'm Angela Torres, the Senior Manager of Local Planning Assistance. I'm here today to talk about the implementation of Imagine 2050 and local comprehensive plans. While, as Chair Lilligren mentioned, I'm the one that's in front of you presenting, but Sarah Berkey, the Senior Manager of Housing and Livable Communities, and Joel Hutting, the Senior Manager of Research, are both here if there are questions on affordable housing need or forecasts, respectively. This process is a group effort of all of the teams in CD. As background, the Metropolitan Land Planning Act directs the council to ensure the coordinated, orderly, and economical development of the region. We'll be focusing on that coordinated piece in this conversation. The council is also directed to prepare guidelines and procedures to assist local governments in meeting the planning requirements, and that's the intention of the process of the proposed action today. System statements, which are issued in the fall of this year, will officially kick off the local planning process. After system statement issuance, local governments are required to submit updates to their comp plans in the year ending in 8, so December 31st of 2028. We'll be back at your next meeting, in fact, to talk more about system statements and some of the other technical assistance programs and projects that we have underway to further implementation of Imagine 2050. And as we turn to implementation, it's important that the council provide guidance regarding how Imagine 2050 will be implemented as it relates to local comprehensive plans during the period between the adoption of Imagine 2050, the distribution of system statements, and then the submittal of the 2050 comprehensive plans. So this specifically impacts comprehensive plan amendments, forecasts, and affordable housing need allocations. As I mentioned, the time between adoption of Imagine 2050, the issuance of system statements, and the conclusion of the dispute period may be confusing to some of the technical aspects of comp plan amendments. As you might know, local plans still reflect, thrive MSP 2040 policies and remain in effect until their 2040, the local government's 2050 plans are authorized and adopted. Yet we have new regional policy development, right? So we need to shift to those new policies. And between February and September of this year, this graph, chart, visual design picture really tries to outline a very complicated process in a very simple, high-level way. We're trying to provide as much specificity to local governments on the impact of change in regional policy to their local comprehensive plans that don't currently reflect that new regional policy. So I just want to step through a couple of these things. Between February and September of this year, communities can choose to have their amendments reviewed under either Thrive or Imagine 2050 system and policy plans, provided that there isn't a system impact or system departure from Imagine 2050 system plans that's proposed as part of an amendment. Communities may also continue to plan and implement their Thrive forecasts. The council will consider revisions to 2050 forecasts through plan amendments. However, the council will no longer make revisions to the 2021 to 2030 affordable housing need allocations, and instead will consider revisions to that next decade of 2031 to 2040 affordable housing need allocations through plan amendments alongside any changes to Imagine 2050 forecasts. You'll see that forecasts and the allocation are inherently linked. One impacts the other. Forecasts kind of leading how affordable housing allocations are determined. After system statements are issued through the end of this year, so September through December, December 31st, the council will consider revisions to Imagine 2050 forecasts included with system statements. The same with the 2031 to 2040 affordable housing need allocations. After this year, so starting in January of 2026, amendments will be reviewed under Imagine 2050 and its system and policy plans. That's after system issuance, after the dispute period has concluded, and the transfer of the focus should be 2050 regional policy, and then locally starting to work on their updates to their 2050 plans. After October 31st of 2028, then 2040 comprehensive plans will no longer be able to be amended so that communities and council can fully focus on reviews of the 2050 plans that will likely be underway at that time. So we are proposing a deadline to where we would no longer accept amendments to the 2040 comprehensive plans. Most communities will have moved on to their 2050 planning by then anyway, but we just want to provide that clear guidance. So the proposed action in front of you today is that the Metropolitan Council issue system statements to communities in the 7-county metropolitan area in September of 2025 with local comprehensive plan updates due to the council by December 31st, 2028. Also to accept comprehensive plan amendments to 2040 local comprehensive plans through September 30th of 2028. Proposed amendments must be submitted and found complete for review by September 30th of 2028 in order to be considered by the council and authorized to be placed into effect. After September 30th, 2028, the council will no longer accept amendments to 2040 local comprehensive plans. The proposed action also includes advice to communities advise communities that all communities must use regional policy and system plans adopted by the council as part of Imagine 2050 for all local comprehensive plan updates and for all comprehensive plan amendments submitted to the council for review after December 31st of 2025. For comprehensive plan amendments submitted and found complete for review before December 31st, 2025, communities may choose to have those amendments reviewed under Thrive MSP 2040 and its system plans, or under Imagine 2050 and its system plans, provided that the proposed amendment is not found more likely than not to have a substantial impact on or contain a substantial departure from the 2050 Metropolitan System Plans adopted in 2025. Additionally, that the Metropolitan Council for comprehensive plan amendments submitted before the issuance of system statements, the council will consider any request for forecast changes in light of Imagine 2050 forecasts and consider interim revisions to those forecasts for inclusion in 2025 system statements. Council staff will work with communities on how best to incorporate any proposed forecast changes into 2040 local comprehensive plans. And finally, that the council will no longer make revisions to the allocations of affordable housing need for the 2021 to 2030 decade, which were originally adopted as part of Thrive MSP 2040. Any proposed changes to Imagine 2050 forecasts may affect the allocation of affordable housing need for the 2031 to 2040 decade and will be considered consistent with the forecast revision approach. And with that, Chair, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Questions on that report, Councilmember Lindstrom?
I'm just curious to know if this implementation schedule generally follows past practice or if there's been any sort of major changes for this time around.
Ms. Torres?
Chair and committee members, it largely mimics the approach taken in for the Thrive MSP 2040 adoption. The one difference being that Thrive wasn't a unified comprehensive plan, and so the schedule was a little bit longer and broader over time. This time it's a little bit easier because there's a single plan, a single timeline, and a shorter impact to local governments because it's only this year, the remainder of this year, where there's a lot of you can choose this or that, or from here on, we're doing this. In Thrive, it was much more extended kind of periods of difference there.
Thank you.
I was just going to say it was a 2-year timeframe
Thanks.
between when
Thank you.
Thrive was adopted.
Right.
System plans in the middle, and then system statements were issued. And that it was about a 2-year time period.
Great, thank you. Good to know. Further questions on Ms. Torres' report? Further questions? Hearing none, Ms. Torres has proposed a series of actions relative to implementation of Imagine 2050. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss for the motion, Councilmember Lindstrom for the second. Any discussion on that motion? Discussion. Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Good work. And I'm really starting to appreciate more of this approach we've taken on Imagine 2050 and how we've been able to truncate some of these processes. I'm sure it's an additional lift by our staff to meet these timelines, but I think this has been a good approach, that it's one plan moving on one timeline. So good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that concludes our business items for today. So we'll move on to our 3 information items. And the first is an update on the Livable Communities Program in alignment with 2050. And Hannah Gary is here. Hannah Gary, rather, Ms. Gary, and then Emily, and is it Seddon?
Seddon.
Seddon.
Thank you.
My apologies,
No
Ms.
worries.
Seddon. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you, council members, for inviting us to give you an update on the process of that we're going through to align Livable Communities Act with Imagine 2050. I am Hannah Gary, and I'm a planning analyst with the LCA team, and I'm joined by my colleague, Emily Seddon, who is a senior planner on our grants team. Before we dive into the program update process, we wanted to give just a brief background refresher on LCA. So LCA makes competitive grants to cities, counties, or other development authorities like an HRA or an EDA. The grants incentivize and support cities that are advancing projects that meet our regional policy goals like housing choice, affordability, living wage jobs, economic opportunity, and then also connecting housing, jobs, and amenities. And central to all of our programs is creating equitable development outcomes, looking at the development process and those physical development outcomes. To be able to apply for a project in the city needs to be enrolled in the LCA program. In order to enroll, cities need to adopt affordable and life cycle housing goals, as well as adopt a city council resolution. We do have a full list of participating cities on our website, and currently there are 78 cities and townships participating in LCA. Over the past 30 years, Livable Communities Act programs have been successful and popular. The council has now deployed more than $553 million over 1,400 grants. In the last 10 years, LCA awards have helped create more than 20,000 affordable housing units, nearly 9,000 market rate housing units, and more than 18,000 living wage jobs, and has increased the region's annual net tax capacity by more than 53 million. We have also helped shape and grow the region's transit-oriented development through our transit-oriented development program. So you might be asking yourself, why change a good thing? The multi-year program update process has been driven by 3 motivators. So first, we need to ensure that the program continues to be impactful in a tangible way to demonstrate the council's priorities. Second, to ensure that potential grantees' experience with the program is positive. And third, we're laying the groundwork to align the program with the new regional development guide, which we knew would be adopted in 2025. While we have made some updates to improve our grant offerings and process annually, what we want to talk about today is this multi-year process to holistically improve and analyze LCA programs. I've lost my place. Test and challenge our assumptions and recommend program design to council that can maximize the benefit over the next planning decade. In 2021, we began regularly soliciting feedback from applicants about the programs and ways that it could be improved. We implemented annual surveys for all applicants and did interviews with developers about their pre-development needs specifically. Based on that feedback, we allocated more funding to pre-development. In 2022, we launched the Affordable Homeownership and Policy programs to fill gaps in our current offerings. We also expanded eligible activities to include rehab of affordable housing based on feedback that we heard from cities and developers. In 2023, we held 2 workshops with CDC members to better understand priorities for LCA. We also conducted numerous interviews with developers, city staff, and county staff. We focused on their local needs and barriers to meeting those needs. We talked with city staff who apply often, who don't apply often, and who are not enrolled in LCA. Then last year, we engaged consultants Mary Kay Bailey and Ellen Waters to specifically help us process considerations for geographic distribution of grants and make process recommendations to improve the grantee experience. We've already adopted some of those process recommendations from the report, like having a single application for LCDA and TOD programs, and we still are exploring other recommendations that came out in that report. Alignment with Imagine 2050 had been planned as part of the scope of the consultant report, but this wasn't the focus of their final report, as they didn't want to make recommendations before the final adoption of Imagine 2050. So in the report, it notes that committee members will need to provide clear direction about how the goals and outcomes of Imagine 2050 are reflected in LCA. So that's the step that we're at right now in this program update process. To be most impactful, our goals should determine the design of our programs rather than letting form dictate the goal. So while we've done some really good work on ways to simplify and improve our process, now that the council has adopted Imagine 2050 as our high-level policy goal, we're kind of zooming back out with our process and are working now to define the LCA goals within Imagine 2050. So our plan is to update and get feedback from CDC this summer before we recommend any kind of program design to be more aligned with Imagine 2050, and that incorporates all of the process work that we've done together. While we won't know which funds are available until early in 2026, we will be asking CDC to approve the program design in the fall so that we have enough time to do pretty intensive outreach and technical assistance with city staff and developers around the new design of the programs. And I will hand it over, oh, no, sorry. So, designing LCA programs includes a complex set of inputs. The goals and the priorities for LCA are defined in statute, Imagine 2050, which is our regional development guide, and the council's strategic plan. Imagine 2050 had a very robust community engagement process prior to being adopted, and we are using this engagement and policy direction as the foundation for our LCA program update work. We also incorporate feedback into LCA programs as much as we can on an annual basis. While this feedback and outreach is ongoing, we're currently organizing a more focused effort around this specific program update. We've now held 4 conversations with developers, city staff, and county staff around the program update, and we have more detail on that later in the presentation. So taking in all of these inputs, we will work to operationalize goals and priorities into grant programs and recommend a program design to council for your approval. Excuse me. We do bring a program design to you each year through the fund distribution plan. And again, what we hope to bring to you this fall for the 2026 program will be the result of this more holistic analysis that we're doing to align the LCA programs with Imagine 2050. So we're hoping to bring this program design to you, everything except for the financials, in fall of this year so that we have several months to work with city staff, developers, county staff around the new program structures and just make sure everyone feels that they have the support that they need to move into applying in 2026. And now I will hand it over to Emily to continue.
Thanks. So at its core, the Livable Communities Act programs fund local action and projects that make communities more livable in alignment with our regional goals. And as the consultants Mary Kay and Ellen noted in their final report last fall, the LCA programs are a tangible way for the Metropolitan Council to partner with communities and see policy in action. And so this kind of mission statement for our programs really centers around the regional goal to build livable communities and is expansive enough to acknowledge that the pathway to build livable communities looks different for every city and every community, depending on its size, its designation, location, history. And the definition also centers our work as an incentive grant program. So from the consultants' report last year, they noted that cities really wanted the council to use LCA programs to overcome local gaps. So under this guiding direction, we have limited resources to drive action in projects, but we want to do that in situations where without our investment, work would be delayed or work wouldn't happen at all. And this is going to look different in every community again. It could be policy, it could be financing hurdles, it could be demonstrating new models of development. So you might be wondering why we put an asterisk after livable. Livable is not one of the more jargony terms we have here at the council, but in this context, it's really complex. And so it's in this sentence trying to encompass all of the Met Council's regional policy goals, and it can mean different things to different people. So the point of the process that we are now in this program update is really to refine the elements of what we mean by livable when we're talking about the Livable Communities Act programs. So the first place we start is with the statute definition of a livable community. So statute gives us a broad definition that includes housing, compact and efficient development, and living wage jobs. It also notes that livable communities exist within a complex ecosystem that include transit, employment growth areas, and require us to intensify land use and to create mixed income communities, and also encourages infrastructure investments, that will boost the communities. The statute also includes specific stipulations that the LCA projects will always fund housing and always fund land use cleanup to intensify that land use. So once we have the statute definition, we start layering in Imagine 2050, and this is where we get to use a lot more colors. So at its foundation, Imagine 2050 has a goal to be equitable and to build equitable and inclusive communities. It is also important that our residents can live healthy lives. We've defined that in the dignity and well-being goal of Imagine 2050. Our region is also dynamic and resilient, meaning that when we face challenges, we face them, especially those of choice, access, and affordability. And we've seen this really clearly in livable communities over the last 30 years. We also mitigate greenhouse gases and ensure communities are resilient to climate impacts as a leader on addressing climate change. And finally, we've committed to, as a council, to protecting and restoring our natural systems. So taken together, this is how the council may define a livable community. And if it makes you a little dizzy, that's okay. I think it looks kind of like an onion, but it is part of a signal of why we can't fund everything through the Livable Communities Act program. We have to refine our vision. I'll turn it back to Hannah.
Thanks. So because we cannot fund it all, we are using stakeholder input to refine the elements of what we mean when we say we fund local action and projects that make communities more livable. So as I mentioned previously, over the past 2 years, we've done interviews with city staff, county staff, and developers, as well as hosted 2 focus group styles conversations with a mix of city staff and had 2 workshops with CDC members. These engagement sessions are also an important part of our communications and change management plan. So we don't want to roll out any updates in 2026 that are a surprise. This month, we have hosted 4 focus group style conversations with developers and city staff to build on those conversations that we've had previously and to refine elements of livable communities that LCA will focus on. We invited staff from cities who apply often, who do not apply often, and who don't participate in LCA. We have invited staff from each of the 16 council districts to capture a broad range of perspectives and development contexts. So we talked with representatives from Blaine, Brooklyn Center, Richfield, Minnetonka, St. Paul, Dakota County, Minneapolis, Eagan, Chaska, and Maple Grove. 2 of those sessions were held in person, one at Blaine City Hall and one at the Dakota County CDA. And then the other 2 sessions were hosted virtually so that we could give everyone options for how they wanted to participate. We are going to continue to reach out to those cities who didn't respond for this initial round of engagement that we did for future engagement sessions that we'll be holding. One of the goals of these conversations was to understand how the definition of livable communities and barriers to livable communities vary across cities so that we can set those high-level goals that honor local context while also advancing our regional goals. So rather than only looking at outcomes like housing units, affordability, or jobs, we wanted to take a more people-centered approach to our programs. So getting information on what people think of as livability and gaps that exist will help us to better direct our programs to filling those gaps. We will use the feedback from our conversations to begin program design, and then we plan to bring early program design concepts to another round of focus group style conversations. Each stage is going to be informing the subsequent stage so that we truly can be responsive to needs in the region. So I can't tell you exactly what our next round of engagement will look like as we're still sifting through the many pages of notes that we have from our earlier conversations, but we will continue to update you on our progress and our plans for our future stages of engagement. We also plan to send out a survey to our entire contact list, which is close to 700 people, to ask about logistics like application timing, funding structure, things that don't have as much nuance that we want to dig into through conversation. And again, keeping our stakeholders informed throughout this process and demonstrating how their input is shaping the outcomes is a key piece of our change management. So we will get into what we've heard in these engagement sessions.
So as Hannah said, we've had 4 engagement sessions so far to help us figure out with our $29-ish million a year, how can we make the biggest impact for communities? So from those 4 conversations, we have heard racial equity and justice orientation must be the foundation of our work and the lens that we are approaching this work through. It's not a surprise. It also came out really strongly in the Imagine 2050 plan. So we're glad to see it showing up here as well. We also heard that livable communities aren't built in a vacuum. Because the Met Council names a goal doesn't mean cities can immediately implement it. And just because city staff might see the value in something, the public or their elected officials may need more time to also arrive at that vision. So setting the conditions within the community is really crucial, and we've heard appreciation for our policy development grant program as doing that currently and wanting it to continue in some form. And so we are hearing that we need to continue this and wanting to drive activities that influence the market to allow for more projects that over time can build on each other and continue to improve communities. We've also heard that there's 3 things that, if they're present, make a community feel livable. The first is choice in housing and transportation. This element aligns really nicely with the Imagine 2050 goal to create a dynamic and resilient region, as choice, access, and affordability are the drivers of that goal. We've also heard about the importance of the feeling of and perception of physical, mental, and cultural safety in a community. This directly relates back to the Imagine 2050 goals around health and safety and building an equitable and inclusive community. Next, the folks we've talked to so far have also talked about how important it is for residents to be able to meet their daily needs within the community, from school to healthcare to their job. And participants from communities where the residents are often going outside of the community to meet those needs also talked about the strain that it can put on their tax base, which further hinders their ability to pursue livable community activities. So meeting your daily needs in the community is also strongly aligned with the Imagine 2050 goals to make our region more dynamic and resilient, and also to ensure our communities are healthy and safe. Finally, we've heard, again, and this will be no surprise to you, about the importance that LCA can help fund tailored solutions to meet local needs. So working within the regional goals, cities and developers have asked us to think creatively about their local context. And it's great to get this reinforcement, because this was also a piece in the consultant's report last fall where there was a misconception that we did not consider the local context in our current program, which we do. And so we're asking ourselves, again, through this program design process, how can we really strengthen and make more visible our ability to meet local needs?
So right now, we are working on the program design to fund actions and projects that will make communities more livable and will be in alignment with our regional goals. There's still a lot that is undecided, but we wanted to just share a little bit right now about the direction that we are heading in. So first, the values that were adopted in Imagine 2050 are guiding how we design the Livable Communities Act programs, and we're putting specific emphasis on the equity and accountability statements, with those being the core to how we are in designing our engagement, how we're funding the programs, and our internal process to support those programs. Second, we know a little bit about what we are going to be funding. So we will continue to fund projects along the development continuum. That is something that we consistently heard in this most recent round of engagement that we did, that gives cities a lot of options in how they support projects, with being able to support from policy all the way through construction. We also know that we will be funding affordable housing and environmental cleanup, because those are listed in statute. And we are going to be working with stakeholders and with this community feedback that we've gotten on how, what that looks like, how exactly we are going to be funding that. But we know that those two elements will continue through the program updates. And finally, we have some shared goals around how we fund projects. LCA is just one of the council's grant programs, and our work is done in alignment and coordination with the council's other grant programs, which also advance regional goals. We know from listening sessions, our annual survey, interviews, and the consultant's report from last year that our process needs to be simpler for grantees. So we are going to be working with potential applicants on designing an application process that both gives us the information that we need, but also is accessible for everyone who wants to apply. We want our work to be data informed and built on a mindset of continuous improvement. And we are including evaluation and data collection, both quantitative and qualitative, into our program design process. And finally, we will continuously improve our programs in partnership with stakeholders. Applicants and potential applicants are the experts on their needs, so we are going to be working closely with potential applicants on how our grant program can best meet their needs.
Great. So before we ask for your feedback, we wanted to share the project timeline one more time. So as Hannah mentioned, we are in this kind of April-May period of finishing up a first round or a round of engagement and moving into some program design work. We'll be seeking more input in from May through July. And then we plan to come back to the CDC in July with an update. We'll be finalizing our recommendations for program design after that, and hoping to bring a recommendation to you in September for acceptance. And as Hannah mentioned, it will just be the program structure. We won't know the money amounts yet, but we'd like to have that approval so we can move forward with outreach and technical assistance before we get those final numbers in February to approve the fund distribution plan, like we do every year. So we want to welcome any feedback you have for us on this process so far, and specifically some questions that would be particularly helpful at this stage we have on this slide, but if any comments are welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Gary, Ms. Hedden, for your work on this, and to your teams as well. And this has been sort of a years-long approach, right? And this committee has been very hands-on in supporting your work, this outreach. This doesn't normally happen every year with Livable Communities programs, and it's getting to this point is very exciting, I would say, and we've been very supportive of our staff doing this major outreach just to shape this program a little more. And so I appreciate that we're at this point.
Thank you.
And that, we've been saying for a long time, for years, we'll get there, and now we're here. So it's very exciting. I appreciate your teeing up these questions as well. And I was just kind of nostalgic that now that Councilmember Johnson has cycled off this committee, and of course Councilmember Wolf is traveling, they're not here. I know they would have something to say here because they've been significant voices through the years in helping us get to this point. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And so now what staff is asking us is input on what this next phase of program design will look like. So committee members, okay, first Councilmember Carter, then Councilmember Cameron.
Thank you. I really appreciate the report today and to know where you've been in terms of gathering input, feedback and guidance for the future in the various ways that you have. It's extremely encouraging. I am very impressed with how you are organizing toward putting in place the recommendations that come from the council, that come from the consultant, that, come from the feedback you received, also from our communities. And in particular, I love this concept that we are working toward continuous improvement, founding the work on where we are and where we need to go. So in alignment with our 2050 plan and our goals in all of the areas that we offer funding in, to have that set of information, metro-wide information, but also specific to our communities, because we're talking about the ability to really focus on those gaps and help with community-based needs to fill those gaps. So with that in mind, can you talk a little bit about what you are perceiving, what you're shaping up by way of information to guide, I hope, even proposals and the work that is being done, both metro-wide in terms of where we are, what our needs or gaps are, but also that can be in relationship to communities and how you will guide even the work that or how you will guide even the information and data that we will already have in place, into the hands of those who are working to respond to these offers of funding.
Ms. Geary.
Yeah, Chair, Councilmember Carter, that's a great question, and I don't have an incredibly detailed answer for you as we're still kind of working through that. I can tell you that we are building an evaluation system along with the program design so that we're not designing the program and then looking back and trying to figure out how are we going to evaluate this. We're also considering kind of the difference between evaluation and monitoring. So what goals are we going to be set that we're going to be evaluating ourselves against, and then what kind of data do we want to collect on an ongoing basis that's more monitoring the program so we can look back and see, like, is this aligned with where we wanted to be heading? Is it not? We currently have a very large spreadsheet that has every single mention that could be related to LCA that was in Imagine 2050, the council strategic plan and statute. So we're looking to see how all of this connects. And we are working with our business analyst on figuring out what are the best ways that we can be collecting data. Are there ways that we can automate some of the data collection so that we're getting it regularly? And part of our evaluation development plan is going to be looking like at that cadence of evaluation. So are we going to make any decisions after 1 year of grant applications? That's been a challenge that we've had currently, is that by the time we're designing programs, we don't really have enough time to analyze data that we've gotten throughout the year from applications submitted. So we're in the process of building that along with the program design. And so since we're still in those early stages, I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like, but it is something that we are, that's central to how we're designing the programs, is that we need to be able to monitor and evaluate them.
I appreciate that, and would, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Would also welcome and encourage that you share back with us as you're developing what in fact is shaping up. It's so important that we understand the level of data and information that will be shared with all. And again, how we even look to provide some sort of understandable data. It may already be there, but how we look to focus that in our evaluation process. So should you be able to return to us as you're in this process so that we don't see it at the last minute as we're looking toward that next period, it would be extremely helpful to all of us, and we would consider it not only a gift, but a necessary accommodation for us. Thank you very much for the work that you're doing in that regard, and I look forward to hearing more.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Cameron.
Yes, so a little bit of my question was addressed with your response to Councilmember Carter's question. So I actually, one comment and then a question. One, I really like I actually thought your layer of an onion analogy was brilliant, and we should start thinking about communities that way. And so that's something that, as we're thinking about communities, we're thinking about adding layers to communities rather than single points. And so that was a really brilliant analogy, and I wanted to highlight that. I have not, my tenure on this committee has been on the opposite end of the spectrum from Councilmember Wolf, so I'm missing her experience this evening. But one thing that you have alluded to several times is the work of a consultant on the Livable Communities program, and that's something that I think has been mentioned at full council before, but could you talk a little bit more about the impetus for hiring that consultant in the context of the revision of the LCA programs?
Ms. Geary.
Sure, yeah. Chair, Councilmember Cameron. There has been discussion for several years with this committee and with the council as a whole around geographic distribution of funds. And that was one of the drivers for bringing a consultant on. The two main directives that they had were addressing geographic distribution and then addressing Imagine 2050. But again, Imagine 2050 hadn't been adopted yet. So their focus was really looking at how do we get more participation? How do we get a broader range of applications? And do barriers exist for smaller cities that are further out in the core to applying? And we heard a variety. There was a pretty big range of comments. And I think rather than detailing the feedback that we got, I would be happy to follow up and send that report. And there's a summary in the report that will do a better job of explaining it than I can right now. So we can follow up with that.
Thanks, Ms. Geary. And Councilmember Cameron, just as most of this committee participated in these guided conversations with the consultants, Ms. Ellen Waters and I can't remember
Mary Kay Bailey.
Thank you. And we used committee time as sort of workshop time, which was really, I felt really productive and broke down these questions, and the issue of geographic distribution, geographic equity were core to these. And I will say, I mean, we talked about Councilmember Wolf quite a bit today, but after this process, she said both publicly and one-on-one that this is a more open process than she had ever been part of, as we talked about the Livable Communities programming. And so just a sense that this approach we're taking here is starting to meet the concerns of council members who don't represent the core or on that map where the program gets used a lot. So, yeah, please.
So just a follow-up, because many of the communities that I represent have benefited from the current structure of the LCA program. So first-ring suburbs of Minneapolis and Hennepin County. And so I'm interested in hearing some of the responses from those communities to restructuring of the LCA, because it does prioritize the specific needs of communities that are experiencing growth in areas where, and it aligns with a lot of our priorities, both in the previous LCA program as well as what we are trying to achieve with Imagine 2050.
Cool. Thanks. And comment from Director Bras?
Yeah. I just wanted to make a note that the report that Hannah and Emily were referencing is actually linked in our business item. It's on page 2. So you can click right through to it and not have to wait for staff to.
Great. Thank you. Further discussion or answer to staff's questions that they proposed? Councilmember Chambas, then Councilmember Lee. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Cameron. I didn't mean to cut you off. My apologies.
Yeah.
Chair, Councilmember Cameron, we have had a fairly good response. We haven't really been asking specific questions about like, do you like this idea? Do you like this idea? We've been focusing more on kind of setting the impacts that we want to be achieving. So talking about what does livability mean for you. We are not intending on moving away from any of the core values that I think exist already in LCA. They're in statute, and they're, I think in a lot of ways, they are serving the needs of cities across the region. So we don't have any specific feedback on program changes. We're just not at that place yet. But we are going to be working closely with cities, with developers on how might this change impact you. And of course, we won't be able to get to a place where everyone is equally pleased with whatever we come out with. But we are going to be working to make sure that we're meeting needs across the region and also taking a hard look at what are we prioritizing and who are we prioritizing in the way that we do this work. So really looking at like who benefits from this. And I think those questions will help guide us to the final program design that we get to.
Thank you. Cool. Thanks. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. And I as well appreciate all the work that staff has done to kind of pull this together and all the community meetings that we had in the past year, as well as those that are planned going forward. We've learned a lot about what the needs of the communities are and where our strengths and weaknesses and where some of the gaps might be and where we can maybe direct our efforts. With regard to the consultants' work, I know we have like 5 links. The link that has the final report was the November 18th, just for council members, because it took me a while to find it. So that might help, and it's summarizing some of the questions that we have today, so it's a very good and useful reference. And some of that speaks to how we talked about funding to meet the goals for 2050 and what that might look like. And I'm very interested in seeing what comes out of the community engagement, in addition to what we already know, particularly in addressing those local gaps, as well as looking at the city capacity, whether it's in terms of their tax revenue or a combination of what that city's capacity is in relation to some of the gaps that we find or that they express. And that different cities will have different needs depending upon, of course, what their profile is. And what I heard was that you're going to be looking at that as we move forward. And as Councilmember Carter said as well, I appreciate the continuous improvement and the plans to do the evaluation along with the program design pieces so that we can kind of measure where we're making the progress and then be flexible to adapt where it's needed. I think we're on a really good track, and I think it's just commendable that we were able to have a consultant process that was so thorough that we can actually take it and use it as we move forward.
Thank you, Councilmember. Agree. Further discussion, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Referring back to the onion page on page 6, I really appreciate the terms dignity and well-being, because it's, especially as we think about the housing crisis, we have to approach all of our issues that we have jurisdiction over with compassion. And I appreciate the address climate change in the yellow. I don't subscribe to organized religion, but this morning the Pope passed, and I know that whoever occupies that position has a lot of power. And one thing he was controversial for is that he was a proud champion of addressing climate change. And in the context of our own national hostile federal administration that denies climate change, I'm glad that we are doubling down on this issue, even if we have to march alone. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First of all, you read my mind about the asterisks. You may be wondering why there's an asterisk. I was just wondering why is there an asterisk. Good job on that. So a couple years ago, the legislature passed a sales tax. Good chunk of it came here for transit, of course, and then a good chunk for housing too. And I'm wondering how, so you were talking about filling gaps, like that's part of this role, it's just to fill gaps. And now there's more money for housing that cities are receiving. And so I imagine that comes into play as we're recreating our programs here. And could you expound on that a little bit about, has that come up very much in the conversations that we've had? And how has it come up and how is it impacting program redesign?
Sure. Let me take this. Yeah. Chair, Council Member, it has absolutely come up with this. We've heard from different really sized cities that they're at different stages with deciding how to spend those new funds on housing. And so it hasn't given us a specific direction around the Livable Communities Act program change, but it is informing how our team is planning to spend the HUD grant award, the Pro Housing Award that we received last fall, or over 2 years in the fall. And so we're still in the planning stages, but the teaser view of that is we are planning on using some of that funding as small grants to cities, kind of in parallel in alignment with our current policy grant program, to allow cities or to give cities support to build programs that will enable them to disperse their funds into affordable housing projects that are aligned with our goals. So we're hoping to start rolling out some of that money this summer. We're ironing out the final details now with our grants administration team, but more on that to come. And those grants will also come before CDC.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. Great. I'll just take a shot at answering some of the questions. Like Councilmember Cameron, I really like this sort of onion graphic that we're looking at, and we're talking about a very complex system, right? And so this is getting to expressing that graphically very well. I think on the, to the questions, does this align with my community's needs? Yes. What's missing? What could be more narrowly defined? And I think even in the program design, sort of the piece that I'm always looking for is the sort of economic development piece. And I know that jobs, living wages are referenced in the statute and throughout our programs. And in some ways, and maybe this is just my own limitations, but it seems like the livable communities programs tend to feel more like housing programs, right? And that economic development piece, it's there, but it doesn't seem quite as intentional to me, and especially now when we're in such a uncertain evolution of what our economy is even going to look like and what sort of economic development looks like. And, I've said this a million times here that every community, I only represent one city in one county, so that's different from a lot of the others, but in the communities I represent, and I think dispersed throughout the region, communities really have a fairly clear idea of where they want to go in economic development, and are we meeting those? And I know the idea is more sort of compact form or whatever in development, but in the new economy, how does supporting small businesses, entrepreneurs look like? And that might be slightly different than a compact land use form. And so I feel like now, since we're really digging deep here, this is an opportunity to maybe introduce some of that economic development support into our programs. I guess that's my big contribution. Cool. Yeah, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you for saying that. I know that was one of the emphasis one of the items of, that was a little bit newly emphasized with the 2050 in terms of well-being, community wealth building, I think goes along with the economic development. And I think that's something that we can focus in on, and what does that look like, especially related to community-based development, and how to get them involved and not just have it be the staff, but a combination of community working with economic development staff.
Thanks for using your term wealth building. That's what I was talking about, but yeah, you put it very well. Cool. Anything else? Are you getting what you need from this committee here? Great.
Yes, thank you.
Cool, thanks. We look forward to this. Was it this summer we're gonna see this again? Was that it? Or yeah. Cool, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Did you want to say something, Lisa? Okay. We'll move on to our second information item. It's the Community Development Research Overview on our 2025 work plan. Joel Hudding is here to present. Welcome.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm here to talk a little bit about the Research 2025 work plan and talk about our overall team and what we do, especially for the new committee members. So our mission is to generate credible, actionable information and insights that advance equitable policy, services, and resource decisions. So we have a team of more than 20 researchers and data scientists from broad backgrounds. So we have sociologists, economists, ecologists, some other ists that come together to provide research and data on really the huge array of topics that we cover in community development. And we are a collaborative, highly integrated team and very service-oriented. So we're often in the background of projects. So a lot of the information that's coming to you is, has been highly collaborative with us in some way, shape, or form, whether it's us providing data, us providing our research expertise, whatever that looks like. Our team has 4 work units. So the first work unit, data development and analysis, handles a lot of our core statutory requirements. So rigorous quantitative data development and analysis, that includes things such as population estimates, park use estimates, these big data development projects. The policy support and development team provides research and leadership on major regional policy and planning initiatives. So that has included helping to steer and manage the overall Imagine 2050 effort in collaboration with other divisions. That's also included leading major policy areas. It includes our forecasting work, a lot of the key inputs into the regional planning process. Our qualitative research team is all about people-centered, rigorous, qualitative data collection and analysis. So this is interviews, focus groups, really trying to develop that rich understanding and nuanced understanding of what people need and want. And then our final work unit, the strategy and product design team, is all about our end users and ensuring that our research meets the needs of our stakeholders, whether that's interactives, reports, whatever it happens to be. We want to be making sure that we understand the needs and that we're meeting the needs. So just quickly going through the major 2025 projects that will come in front of you at some point over the course of this year. So all of our teams work very closely together, but I'll just walk through these. To start with, from our data development and analysis team, the population estimates you'll see come around July, as you'll see the parks use estimates. Those are, are statutorily required projects that really inform a lot of other inputs that ultimately determine funding. We have the land use inventory, which takes aerial imagery and classifies down to a very small geographic scale the land use throughout the region. And you'll also hear information about trends in development. In our policy support and development team, you've all probably heard about the regional economic framework, but that is our comprehensive economic development strategy alternative for the region. We have our climate pollution reduction grant, which is our EPA-funded climate change mitigation work. So that's all around greenhouse gas mitigation, providing tools and research and data to all the communities within the region, and actually extending into a couple of other counties outside of the region as well. Our population and employment forecasts, you've heard a lot about those, a lot of the outputs of that work, but that work continues. It's an ongoing process of updating and maintaining those models, and then also providing a number of tools for communities to use for the new natural systems policy. Our strategy and product design team is leading our regional indicators initiative, so that's outcomes measurement for Imagine 2050. We are also overhauling our community profiles, which is kind of a flagship interactive data visualization tool. It's a multi-year project. It's a major tool with a lot of integrated technology. And conducting a lot of user research, as I described earlier, and updating and maintaining our interactive data visualizations. And our qualitative research team is leading our project on residential preferences of HRA voucher holders, so trying to get a better understanding about what they prefer in their neighborhoods and in their housing units, and understanding how that varies across different demographic groups. And then that team is also handling a number of, helping with a number of Imagine 2050 goals and frameworks, such as the environmental justice framework. And just an example of how we really just all work together, even though we have these individual teams. And you could even extend this to how we work together across the council, but just looking at our climate pollution reduction grant, our data development and analysis team, is working on data sets and models of emissions data. Our qualitative research team is working to understand community and climate leaders' perspectives. Our policy support and development team is ensuring that this work aligns with regional policy areas and in other internal initiatives. And then finally, our strategy and product design team is testing and reviewing the interactive tools that come out of this work, and reports and websites. I'm going to be quick here just to make sure we get to the next presentation, but much of our research is published through online interactive tools, and you can find that at metrocouncil.org/research, but just a couple of them quickly. Community Profiles provides a wide range of data and information that you can get for all the communities in the Twin Cities region. Equity Considerations data set has nearly 300 equity relevant pieces of data at a census tract level. So it allows for a very robust analysis of equity. Our greenhouse gas inventory, I've mentioned we're going to continue to expand that to include all the communities within the Twin Cities region this year, as well as our strategy planning tool, which helps them also look at how different actions that they can take will reduce greenhouse gas emissions in their individual community context. And then our rent trends, which you'll hear about later in the year as well, looks at changes in rent by class, by bedroom size in most of the cities in the region. And of course, we've published lots of reports. The next two that will become, the next one that will definitely be coming to you is a parks use estimate. So expect to see that. We'll do an update to the regional forecast likely next year. And you'll hear a lot more about our regional economic framework and trends in housing and development. And data development, we have lots of data available through our download data, our existing download data portal. So it includes a lot more things than even what is in community profiles, but allows you to download those raw data for your use. And of course, we are always here to help with these tools or to help answer questions. And with that, I will leave it to you to ask us any questions that you have or specific things that stood out to you or priorities you have or things you saw that were missing. Yeah, I will open it up.
Thank you. And if I may, I'm just trying to thanks for this presentation and this work. Fascinating, very interesting. And just that last slide you showed with the download data portal, is that accessed through the metrocouncil.org/research? Okay, cool. Because one of the things I've noticed out in the communities, first off, a lot of folks don't know anything about Met Council and what it is we do. And I was at a community meeting not long ago and someone was bemoaning the lack of data at the Met Council website. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're a data generating, entity. That's what we do. And so I guess it's just a comment more about how we can, what this public face looks like and how this can be easily accessed by the people that we're serving. And he looks like you want to say something about that, Mr.
No, thank you, Chair. I just strongly would reiterate your point and very much agree with you. And that's part of us creating our strategy and product design team is to really help us understand end user perspectives and help make our tools
Thank you. And then the other thing I would say, and then I'll turn to committee members, sorry, I'm preempting your time, but the other piece I'm very interested in is the qualitative piece and how that figures in. And at my day job, we're right now developing an Indigenous specific evaluation method that relies really heavily on the qualitative, more the stories that people are telling us, and then how we can fit that into a data system that's useful talking to our funders, our communities and things. So it's really encouraging to see how you're folding that in, and I look forward to seeing how that impacts the work going forward. Thanks. Committee members.
Could I just
please,
add?
Director, and then Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just related to your comment on the qualitative research, just as examples of that, we've tried to demonstrate that through the development of Imagine 2050 with the different cohorts that we've been working with, and really not just telling stories from our perspective, but bringing those voices to you as a part of that, but also just, you might remember my colleague Darcy Vandegrift at some earlier committees of the whole also providing those themes and that analysis. There's a lot of work that goes on in the background to get to a simplified report as she was sharing. And that's part of our wrap-up documentation as well, is bringing all of that engagement into what did we do, how did we do it, and documenting that as part of Imagine 2050. And you'll see more of that going forward as well.
Thank you. Look forward to it. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair Joel. So for the interactive tools and some of the changes to the community profiles and the technical assistance, do you have ideas about how you want to change that yet, or is that going to be some engagement or a combination?
Yeah, Chair, Councilmember Chambliss. I think we have some ideas about some basic things that we know from years of having these tools, but yeah, we have extensive engagement that is ongoing, that is underway, and we really want to have a really solid understanding of the end user perspective and the needs before we actually go about making these big changes.
Okay.
Yeah, Councilmember Chambliss.
And then the other question is, I know in the past, if we wanted to look at demographic data or ethnic data, we really had to rely heavily on the ACS database. And now with the census data providing us more of the information that we were kind of extracting out of another database, would we still have access to ACS plus the census? And is the census disaggregated data going to be available to users?
Mr. Attorney.
Yeah, Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, yes. The short answer is yes, we have access to all of those. I haven't seen any indication that those like kind of flagship data products are going to get caught up in whatever has been going on with federal data access. But I believe we'll continue to have access to those resources.
Both of them?
Both the Census Bureau and the American Community Survey, yes, or the Census and the ACS.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on this report? Yeah, Councilmember Cameron.
So first, I'll say that I also agree with your comments about qualitative data. Full disclosure, I'm a former mixed methods researcher, so of course I have a strong preference for inclusion of that data, but it's also really important. I found my way to that type of work because oftentimes the data that we use to develop and the metrics that we are using to analyze communities don't include ethnic and cultural communities. And so the way in which we structure data questions to ask those questions often exclude those community voices. And so it's really important to include that qualitative data, not only to more understand the why of any data question that we're asking, but also because we may not understand the what fully unless we include those community voices and understand the nature of the issue we are trying to address within communities. So really want to highlight that. A couple of questions around, well, first, you have some data research and reporting and presentations that are upcoming. Is there a methodology for determining, aside from the required reporting that we have to do, how do we determine what else we might look for? Is that a decision? How do we come together and say, okay, these are goals that might inform how community development looks at Imagine 2050, and how do we determine what of all the data that we have available, how do we prioritize what we could look at and do a deeper dive into?
Mr. Attorney.
Chair, council member, that's a great question that I think we're even trying to wrestle with ourselves. Like how do we prioritize among all the many things that we work on? I'd say, yes, we do have like some basic things in state statute. We also have a lot within Imagine 2050 that is, whether it's data sets that we need to develop or whether it's tools that we need to develop to help communities, that determines our work as well. And then, sometimes it can be that there are some really good questions that are coming up in committee meetings and with discussions among all of you that we determine we need to do some research on. So it comes from a lot of different places. We are also, as part of our own internal strategic planning, we have been working on a prioritization lens that helps us understand how we can prioritize among the many different requests that we that we get, and we would certainly be happy to share more about that.
And then so I, looked at the research website, and one of the things that immediately came to my attention, I think this speaks to some of the questions that or the comments that the chair made, was that a lot of the reporting is inaccessible to most people who are not either embedded in this type of policy work or familiar with data. And I think, providing simplified tools for some of this reporting would also do a lot. I think it becomes a challenge to do that for everything, but providing, there's some really great graphics and interactive tools, and utilizing that more than I think, giving an option to download the complete data set, but really emphasizing high level, big picture data and reporting, and then that in the weed stuff is really for folks who want to dive in and take a deeper look. And I think that's really important in helping to educate, not only decision makers and policy makers, but educating the broader community of the work of what the council is doing and educating those who may be passionate about, I think one of my favorite examples is that canopy coverage data set, that people really love that. And it's a very accessible tool, and I hear positive things about it all the time. And so leaning more into that type of reporting rather than the really technical aspects of reporting where we have the flexibility to do so.
Great. Mr. Harding, did you want to comment?
Just Chair, Council Member, I completely agree with you. I think that's generally the direction that we are trying to head into as well.
Great, excellent points, I agree. Yeah, further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. It's been reported that there's been a fair amount of consternation in DC with the cuts to federal employees in the census and probably other places. And I imagine that would have ramifications for us to access in the future. If not right now, that would have ramifications for us. I'm wondering, is that correct? If the federal statistics are slow to roll out, are not as comprehensive, or what have you, that would have implications for your work. Have you seen that yet? I imagine it's too early to see anything like that. But your thoughts on that?
Mr. Harding.
Chair, Council Member, yes, we have seen some things. The EPA, we've seen the EPA essentially eliminate certain tools and data sets that we rely on. We have local copies of those, and I'll also mention that Harvard University has been kind of archiving and maintaining a website of all these databases that are being taken down by the federal government. So we have seen a little bit of it. We've seen some interesting changes to technical documentation of Census Bureau products. But we haven't seen any indication of like the main Census Bureau products that we rely on not being maintained. But a lot of this is out of our hands. Yeah.
Don't tell the feds that Harvard has that information. That might get Harvard in trouble with the federal government.
Well, thank you. Further questions for Mr. Harding or discussion on this report? Hearing none, thanks so much, and thanks to the teams of researchers as well. I mean, it's impressive. We are a data generating organization, and so it's good to hear this report. Thank you. And, I know we don't really have a hard stop at 6 o'clock, but we have one more report that should be about 15 minutes. Committee members cool with that?
I do have a hard stop at about 6:10.
Okay, so let's move forward, Ms. Lee, if that's cool, and others, because this is very exciting, right? It's our first ever, what we used to call historical cultural study, and it's now grounded and growing, a living history of our region's parks and trails. So really looking forward to hearing about this. So Ms. Lee, welcome, and your colleagues, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chair and Council members. For the record, I'm Jessica Lee. I'm a Parks Planning Analyst, and with me tonight is Kristen Rabatouris and Riven McKnight from our research team.
Welcome.
And we are here to present Grounded and Growing, which is the new name of what was formerly called the Historical Cultural Study. It's a living history of our region's parks and trails. So first, I just wanted to explain why we decided to do this work. So a few years ago, the 2020 amendment to the Regional Parks Policy Plan committed the council to conducting a cultural historical study that describes and documents the inequitable policies that have shaped the development of our system. And the desire behind this commitment was to better understand how we arrived at current day conditions in order to create a more welcoming and equitable system moving forward. So the scope of this project was to understand how racism and racist practices shaped our system today, and the experiences of our communities of color. And we wanted to specifically to use stories to highlight the range of experiences by the American Indian, Indigenous communities, people experiencing immigration or disabilities, and across a wide variety of age, genders, and sexual orientation. And our goal with this project was to build a more inclusive regional parks and trail system through education and building empathy. And so this project is a few years in the works now, and along the way we've had a few external collaborators. A couple of years ago we hired Hess Royce and Company to be our consultant, and they specialized in historical research. And they worked with Zan Associates, they subcontracted to do the engagement work for this project. And along the way, we also had a partner task force made up of our regional park implementing agency staff, and we had at least one member from each agency represented. And they helped us along the way to refine the project, engage with the consultants, and really guided our work to what it is today. So again, throughout this project, we really wanted to emphasize engagement and storytelling. And we used focus groups and interviews, including recorded video interviews, to do this in order to center voices of historically marginalized communities. And through these focus groups and interviews, we asked people to describe their experiences with park and trail use, access and barriers, safety and belonging, parks programming, and ideas to create a more inclusive and welcoming system. And about a year ago, our consultants wrapped up their work with us, and they gave us all their engagement findings and data, along with the historical context and all the research that the historians provided. And they handed that off to us, and from there, we handed it off to our research team. And so I will now give this over to Kristen.
Hi, thank you for having us here today. So yes, as Jessica said, we kind of received those deliverables from the consultant, a great wealth of information, engagement, as well as historical information that the consultants provided. And I believe that our consultants did produce a prototype of a long digital story format. So we had a jumping off point to re-engage the parks agency partners and ask them, what do you think about this? How does this work for you? And we heard some things based on that, which is essentially that the parks agency staff are really considered the primary users right now of this work. And they talked about and described situations where they needed flexible formats. They needed like chunks, bite-sized chunks of information, kind of building off of previous comments of the previous item. They wanted to see strong connections between present and past so that there were some navigating principles of the information. They had ideas for how to bring it forward and into current conversations. And they also really wanted, I think we all acknowledge that a complete and just comprehensive history was not going to be achieved here. So we wanted to make sure that we were creating opportunities for the project to be porous, to be collaborative, to continue to grow, to fill in gaps as they were discovered, for both the historical information, but as well as this engagement data. Like, let's keep going. Let's make sure that the conversation stays available to park users or potential park users. And so with that in mind, that was also great feedback for us so that we could start to frame up solutions. And so this project's deliverables here, you can see here, kind of what our response to that feedback is. And it really pushed us to get creative with some of the tools that we have, which are largely for visualizing quantitative data sets and other things of that nature, or spatial analysis, but they can do other things. And we certainly made them do some of those other things they weren't necessarily designed for. So these are the 5 themes of the project that, after reviewing all of the excellent engagement work that was led by Zan Associates, thinking about some of the other recent parks research, the Imagine 2050 Youth cohort and things they said about parks and trails, the Youth in Parks Project and the 2021 Visitor Study. There was a lot of alignment here, and so we decided to make sure that we were, drawing on that and really bringing things together and making them clear. So we landed with these 5 themes. clearly not mutually exclusive, very interconnected, right? But still distinct enough that we were able to go through the stories that were shared with us and go through some of the historical information and, use these as tags for that information. So again, providing that way of navigating what is an overwhelming amount of information if it wasn't filterable or didn't have some other ways of organizing it. And I think once we had those themes, once we had a sense of what to build for park agencies, and then we started working with the Parks and Trails staff here at Met Council to name the project or rename it to give it some character, and then to also really distill the purpose of the project into a statement. And then from there, we started to build the interactive tools that I'm going to let Raven discuss.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the types of information and data that you can expect to find throughout this project website, and I'll be brief, but that's okay because it's all interactive, so it'll be better if you dig in on your own time later anyway. So starting on the left-hand side of this slide, we have this tree, which kind of became the key visual metaphor for this project. This is our grounded and growing tree. So the exposed roots represent groundedness and are associated with historical information, and then the trunk and branches represent growing into the future and are associated with more present and future-oriented information. Starting with the roots, you might notice right away that there are 5 of them, so one associated with each of those themes Kristen discussed. And if you click on any of the individual roots or use the menu on the left-hand side, you'll be taken to a historical timeline. One thing I should maybe note is we learned at our MPOSC presentation that this historical timeline isn't super optimized to look at on iPads, so you'll probably have a better experience on a laptop or desktop computer since that's sort of how we designed it. Once you get to the historical timeline, you're going to see a pretty broad array of information depending on which theme you've selected. We have a lot of different events on this timeline, ranging from the 18th and even a few events in the 17th century all the way through present day, so starting with early written records of European contact with Minnesota all the way through the most recent round of park equity grants that the Met Council awarded to implementing agencies. So you've got a long span of time and a few different types of events you can see, everything from government action and policy to historical images like photographs or paintings and key social and political movements. That's a lot, so we've provided some filters to make it a little easier to navigate. By default, the timeline is filtered by theme, but you can also filter by park agency when that's applicable, and by scope to see things that are national versus regional or local in scale, and we're working on some topic-based filters. 2 key things to note about the types of information that did and didn't end up on this timeline. First and most important, this timeline does sort of start with European contact in the 17th century, and that's not because we're suggesting that that's when history begins. Rather, we felt that with the resources and sort of historical expertise that we had available for this project, we and our users, our audience, would be better served by us directing folks to other existing projects that have already done the work of describing pre-colonial Minnesota, that have really captured Indigenous and American Indian voices. So on the timeline and throughout the project, you'll see us link to other project websites or books that we found really informative, mostly projects led or written by American Indian people. And yeah, we thought that was a better use of our time and our audience's attention than us trying to sort of reinvent the wheel with limited resources. Second, you can probably tell just from my description, we went a lot broader than just events that have happened in our regional parks and trail system, because we know that people's experiences of parks and trails don't necessarily fit into the boundaries of what is regional versus local. You know, whether a park was designated as regional in the 70s or in the 2000s, that doesn't necessarily change how people experience them. So we went for more inclusive than exclusive information here. The last thing I would note is that there is an invitation to collaborate here. So there's a form to submit an event to add to the historical timeline. That's open to park agencies, the public, any of you, if you can think of something we missed. There's certainly lots. We've really just scratched the surface here. The next thing I'll talk about is the branches, which are associated with more present day information. And I'll go quickly over this because this information is much more familiar to you all. If you click any of the branches, you'll get an interactive timeline with some information by park agency. So things like park use estimates, population characteristics, demographics for visitors and residents of that park agency. alongside regional forecasts to 2050. I think our key point with this dashboard is really to highlight the importance of addressing current disparities in park and trail use, especially in light of how we expect our population to change between now and 2050. We know there are some disparities in who uses and accesses our parks and trails today, and we expect our population to grow increasingly diverse. So we just want to highlight here the importance of continuing the good work that has been started at our park implementing agency partners and at the Met Council, because disparities really can only become a bigger problem if they go unaddressed, especially as our region grows and changes. Finally, I'll mention the trunk of the tree, which is really the most interactive component. We were very inspired by the community engagement work that happened earlier in this project. So we really wanted to find a way to continue highlighting community members' voices and stories. So this is an interactive map we've built where people can submit their stories about experiences in the outdoors, and then we create an interactive map that allows you to explore those stories. It's kind of a two-stage process. On the left, you can see the submission form, which is where you can zoom in on a map, drop a pin, and write up your story about your experience in that location. Important to note that we will monitor that and review submissions before they get published, just to make sure everything is appropriate and doesn't include any personally identifying information. Once that review is complete, the stories will populate on this interactive map, and you can scroll around and read other people's experiences. Quick shout out to our former Parks intern, Brooklyn Clymer, who really started this portion of the project. She did the engagement that has started populating that map. And this is another place we really invite you all to participate. If you feel so inclined, we'd love to see your stories pop up on this map in the coming weeks and months.
Yes, thank you. One last point to make about how we packaged and are sharing the engagement data. The story formats are broad, again, trying to be responsive to the needs of park agencies. We did the council's excellent videographer, Carol, shot videos, long-form videos with participants that really, were very personal, that really dove deeply into their background and their relationship to the outdoors, to parks and trails. And then we made shorter videos where we were able to use our themes to pull quotes and specific clips around those. And so we invite certainly for all audiences to look at the full interviews, but we also have the shorter videos that highlight the themes available right on the webpage. In addition to that, we have beautiful photos and we have written stories that have been packaged and included in various formats, again, trying to make it very easy for parks agencies to grab and use this information in the variety of ways that they share that they might. And I will just say that if technology is on our side, we might be able to play this like 2-minute video around access. Oh, is someone clicking for me? Magic.
Come on, technology.
Oh. Nope, okay, that's okay. Well, the videos are available on the webpage. They're all under 5 minutes. Invite you to view all of those when you have time to do so. Oh. And lastly, I certainly want to lift up the recommendations from participants. In the engagement, almost every focus group or interview ended with a key question. What would you do to improve parks and trails, to make them more accessible, to make your experiences in them better? And we've summarized, in a very short format, some of the great responses that we received. A lot of this information is also in the trends dashboard, really highlighting, what some actionable things that can happen to improve those experiences, improve access, improve a sense of safety or sense of belonging. And the history of our land recommendations also are well aligned with the recommendations from the American Indian Advisory Council. I think they take them a step further, and we know that that is work that is planned among the Park and Trails team for as part of their 2050 work plan. So I think next steps here, I'll let Jess speak to the latter part of the slide, but I'll just say, or highlight again that the historical information is ongoing, that data collection is available to contribute to. The outdoor experience story collection also will be ongoing, and we will periodically analyze that, share it back with agencies. And then we will also, of course, continue to update that quantitative information we have about visitors and visitor demographics, resident demographics, and park use over time.
Yeah, thank you. And so moving forward, we're looking at ways to create workshops or trainings that we can use with, initially with the park agencies, and then beyond that, hopefully into the community. And as soon as we get our new Parks Ambassador person on board, which will hopefully happen in the next couple of months, we're really hoping they can take this and use this with all of their engagement work, especially over the summer as we engage with the communities. And then even, teaching it to the park implementing agency staff, like particularly the outreach staff, and having them hopefully included in some of their own engagement work. So that's kind of the short term. And then, long term, exploring new partnerships and just seeing where we can go with it outside of our little world here. So.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. And I'll turn to Councilmember Lyncham because I know you have a hard stop.
I got to run, but I wanted to stick around because I found this so interesting. And I had a chance this afternoon just to scratch the surface of it. We were talking about data a minute ago and how it can be challenging in this ginormous organization that we're all a part of. Yeah. And I think you do it very well here. You both put the numbers out there, but then you also make it real with these stories. I watched some of the videos, really compelling. Yes. My gosh, really memorable stories. And what I also really like about this is it comes along with concrete examples or recommendations to change policy to increase access to our parks. So I love to see that. I mean, it's like, here's what we're seeing broadly with the big numbers, with the millions of people. Here's some stories that kind of make it real. And then here are things you implementing agencies can do to perhaps increase those numbers. Yeah. So great job is my point.
And now I got to run.
It looks like Greg might have queued up the video. Sure. So is that, Greg, if you can play that, please.
Thank you, Greg.
Access to parks is, it's an equity issue and it's a public health issue. And our communities are
Greg, if you're able to turn up the volume.
Issues in large part because of our disconnection from the land. And so there are so many opportunities for the park systems to be supportive with that.
Well, I lived not far from this park for 15 years ago, and I didn't actually know this park existed. I used to see people walking in, and but I didn't understand what it was. So sometimes I look back and I was like, I wish I knew this. This is 2006. So I find this park 2014 or I think 14. When I discovered this park, I was so amazed how beautiful it is, and bringing my kids here, and I was like, wow, I wish I knew when they were babies, because they have so much resources that my kids could benefit from it before they went to kindergarten.
It's important to advocate for the things that help make these parks more accessible for ourselves as well as our neighbors. And some of those accessibility points have to do with cost. The parking can be prohibitive. Housing, access in terms of transportation. And that's one of the things that we looked at when we were on the Community Advisory Committee that really looked at equity and accessibility of this lake. Bathrooms, I was pregnant at the time when I was on that Community Advisory Committee, and sometimes you need to be able to walk around the lake and access a restroom. You need to make sure that you have a space that people feel comfortable and welcome in.
There's multiple barriers. That's one of them. How much does it cost? Is it legal? Do I need a license? How much does that cost? Is it safe? I'm an immigrant. I'm not here legally. Is it safe? Is it in my language? There's so many things that people have fear of.
People who grow up in Minnesota, it's basic. Some parks are free, or how to read the map. And another kind of things about the park system. But for us, for immigrants, for refugees, when the English is the second language, this becomes a huge challenge. For example, I started hiking on winter because I want to be outside during the winter and feel better. And I don't know, in that moment, some parts, the map and the trails change the use for winter activities like cross-country ski or snowshoes. And I just go to the park and start walking, and I go into the trail, and the skis come and yelling me, get out the trail, get out the trail. I was so scared because I don't know what to do, how come back, or how continue the trail until the end. So I just go into the woods and try to go out the more fast I can.
It's amazing how many buses you need to get to Bead Muscat or to get to Bunker. And sometimes once you get there, you still have to walk a mile. Cars are a luxury, and unfortunately, not a lot of people of color have them. And state parks and water became so important to me and regional parks, excuse me, that I had to find something I could walk to because I need it. It's not a want, it's a need.
Well, thanks, Greg, for showing that. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, very well done. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. It's really, really important to emphasize the history and the cultural study and improving and increasing access to those who may not be using it. I do know that during COVID, we had groups that probably hadn't used our parks and trails that were using it, and we sort of kind of probably have dropped off from that. I know some of my friends and I were walking in the winter, all winter long, and we enjoyed it. I mean, some of them even got snowshoes out, or were doing cross-country skiing and being very creative with it. So it is very enjoyable. I think on page 2 of the presentation, it talks about this formerly referred to as historical cultural study. So it's been changed to, I don't know why it says formerly. Formerly. On page 2, it says formerly referred to as historical cultural study, but then on the page before it says why historical cultural study. So I'm confused a little bit about that.
Sure. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, I believe the Parks team had been referring to it as the historical cultural study as kind of like its work plan title, right? That we will conduct a study that's a historical cultural study. We didn't find that to be the most compelling name for the project or a way for people to drive engagement to the project. So we renamed, it still is a historical cultural study, but we renamed it Grounded and Growing, just to clarify that.
Okay, because I'm not connecting the historical cultural study to the Grounded and Growing. That almost sounds like a kind of a brand-ish, but anyway, it's still a historical cultural study, right?
Yes.
So my question is regarding the scope. As we're talking about understanding racist and racist practices historically, I was surprised not to see African descendants of slaves listed. We do not consider ourselves immigrants when we came here. Right. So I'm not sure if that was we were considered immigrants, but many African Americans, descendants of slaves, do not consider ourselves as immigrants, but we're here as a result of human trafficking through slavery, and it's really hard to not see that listed here. And as a person of African American descent, it almost feels like erasure. And what we're trying to solve for is marginalization. But if it's not there, then it almost feels like that. So I would be, very careful with that erasure part. And if you see the historical cultural study, then that helps us stay focused on what we're trying to do. So perhaps, it could be flipped or used together, but I think having it be what the new name is by itself, grounded and growing, takes away from the why in terms of understanding it at a glance. If I were not to know, I would not necessarily know that it was about history. So I would encourage you, as we're going forward and adding branches to the tree and also even looking at your areas of focus, to be inclusive of African American descendants of slaves. And also, I do have some suggestions. There are a number of parks where you can get information from the African American perspective, and that's North Commons in North Minneapolis, the MLK Park, Phelps Park, McCray Park, all those were in the neighborhood where I grew up in South Minneapolis. And there's various groups like Melanin in Motion that Bikes on the Trails. Anthony Taylor, who's on our Parks and Recreation Committee, leads that effort and can provide some additional African American voices to the study.
Great points. Ms. Lee, did you want to comment? Please.
Please, thank you, Chair and council members. I really appreciate all of that. And I do want to just make sure that we all know that we did engage the African American community, and we met with several groups. And I'm really sorry that it wasn't listed on that slide. That was not intentional. But I do want everyone to know that we definitely did engage that community.
Appreciate that. And I really appreciate thank you, Ms. Lee, and bringing up those points. Councilmember Chambliss are bringing up that point, because if you look at the data about who's actually visiting the parks, you see that big gap within the Black community, which is called out. But I really like your terminology of descendants of slaves, right? I mean, I think that's important. That's a systemic kind of comment, right? And I would note that, Grounded and Growing is like a brand, right? We're branding, and then the byline is a living history of our region's parks and trails, but that should be evident, right, and prominent. But thanks for those points. Finished, Councilmember?
Yes.
Cool. Further discussion, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is great work. This brings to mind when I think about this is at the city level, but it boggles my mind that we ever had in Minneapolis a lake named after John C. Calhoun, whose public speeches laid the legal framework for the Confederates' secession. And when we think about things like that, that some things and places are name certain things to exclude people. So I really appreciate the scope and nature of this work.
Great, thanks for that comment. I would note that in the videos, we saw both Carly Badharple and Dr. Kate Bean, identical twins, and their family, the Bean family, were instrumental in laying the groundwork through participating in the parks planning in Minneapolis to changing the name of the lake to B'dai-Makaska. So it's a sort of a example of the system working, and so thanks for including that. And the other piece I really want to commend you, I mean, I like the tree and how that leads into the data. I've been kind of navigating that while I'm here, but I really want to commend you on the storytelling part of this. And I'm just seeing a lot of parallels in this committee meeting to my day job, but we struggle with the same thing about how we tell our story, how we put things out. We've hit on some of the exact same strategies, short videos, interactive sort of story generation. And so I really look forward to seeing how this kind of grows as we go forward, because we have found it to be very effective. Have people telling their own story. Right, so excellent work. Cool. Anything else? Further discussion? All right, we look forward to seeing how this grows and develops for sure. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Anything else, committee members? Director Barajas, no? Michelle? Okay, seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.